Hi, welcome to You Time. The purpose of You Time is to help you prioritize yourself by taking a few minutes each day so that you can be the best version of yourself for the other people in your life. The information presented in this interview is not necessarily my personal endorsement. It is also in no way an endorsement from my employer. Hello, welcome to You Time with Synne I. Today on the show, I have Dr. Alice Kerby, and she's here to talk a little bit about what she does professionally and how she practices self-care. Welcome, Dr. Kerby.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Synne.
Would you like to introduce yourself and tell the listeners a little bit about your background and what you are currently studying?
Certainly, yes. So I'm a doctor of physical therapy, and I have a small mobile practice here in San Diego, and I work primarily with geriatrics. So I work with a lot of older people, which is actually really fun. I have a lot of very impressive 90-year-olds, a lot of squats, and a lot of other impressive feats of strength. So it's actually a lot of fun. And then recently, what I've really putting a lot of passion and energy into this past year and a half is I started studying somatic experiencing. And so I'm on a track, it's a 3-year program to become a somatic experiencing practitioner. And for those of you who don't know what it is or haven't heard of it, you can look up traumahealing.org is kind of the main website. And it's a system of nervous system regulation that was developed by Dr. Peter Levine, who's a psychiatrist. And it's used widely with mental health professionals. So it's a wonderful tool. I've been using it with a lot of the women that I work with. When I do the SE work, I don't so much work with my same patient clientele that I work with physical therapy. Sometimes I'll do a little bit of SE with some of my geriatric patients, but I tend to work more in the online world with busy women, with women like myself, because when I was working more in an outpatient setting with younger people as a physical therapist, I noticed how much stress and anxiety seem to be causes of pain, and also to keep people really stuck in their pain patterns. So then I started exploring with the SE, which is trauma resolution, and the nervous system kind of creates a nervous system resiliency. So I found that when I can work with women using the SE work, and with men too. Right now I just primarily focus with women, but when I can use this work and go in and do a little internal work using the somatic experiencing or the SE techniques, helps people to have more lasting results with their pain, and also generally with stress and anxiety, because I notice so many people just tend to have really high levels of stress and anxiety, and that can cause chronic pain. It can lead to more physical problems, and it just leads to a lack of enjoyment of our lives. So that's what got me interested in the SE work, and I'm finding it to be very effective in just helping people to create better relationships with stress and with anxiety, which then in turn leads usually to decreased pain, and increased levels of function and pleasure in their lives.
This is really interesting to me, Dr. Kerby. You and I don't know each other, and you don't really know anything about my background, but my background by way of formal education is in psychology and clinical social work.
Awesome.
So I practiced in mental health for a number of years, and then actually was recruited to work as a project manager for a for-profit company that did behavior change through technology. And I just happened to kind of be resourced into the area of pain management. And so I actually spent 10 years working on developing educational tools for both healthcare providers and for patients for managing chronic pain.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'd love to pick your brain about that actually after we do the podcast.
Yeah, for
'Cause I
sure. And a lot of it was based on a medical, let me say a traditional medical model with
Mhm.
pharmacologic solutions.
Sure.
But a lot of it was, unfortunately, the website doesn't exist anymore, else I would refer you to it. There was really a big focus on the self-management of pain and self-care and kind of a holistic approach to managing your chronic pain. And I'm actually, this is sort of my first introduction to SE, so I'm really interested in hearing you speak about this.
Yeah, I was going to ask if being from that background, if SE had been introduced at all. And I think I was introduced to it by my therapist that I started seeing about a year and a half ago. I'd gone through kind of a major life transition and some trauma, and I'm so lucky I found this lady. She's amazing. But she practices SE, and so she knew I'd always had a really big interest in neuroscience and how the brain works, which is sort of what led me along into my medical path, even though I ended up as a physical therapist and not a neuroscientist. So in working with her, we just started talking more about like why the techniques she was teaching me were working and like how they worked. And she's like, you should really check out the training. So I did. And like I said before, it's a 3-year training. And so I'll just talk a little bit about how the training works is you meet 3 times a year, and it's over a 4-day period. And then in between those trainings, the 3 times a year training, you have case conferences and you have like supervised study groups, and then you have to do so many sessions, and that's 3 years. So each training builds on itself, and then each year builds on itself. So it's really amazing work, and I do love that it's backed by so much research in neuroscience because I'm kind of a huge brain geek. So it's great. And the teacher that I'm learning from, her name's Abby Blakesley. I don't want to say, I may be wrong about the last name, but she's amazing, and her research is all in neuroscience. And she does a lot with implicit and explicit memory, and just goes over like the limbic system and much more than that. I'm kind of giving it I'm putting it in a few words. So yes, so what I found to be some of the most wonderful things about SE is that in the way that I'm using it and working with both my patients and just with my female clients online, I do online courses that are dedicated to stress and anxiety relief. And all of these courses have a component where I do calls with the women that I'm working with. And we've started doing what I'm calling somatic strategy calls. So we're going in and using some of the SE work, which works with sort of reprogramming some of the neurological patterns that get dialed into us for whatever reason when we have a perception of trauma or when we have a traumatic event. And this can link up a lot with chronic pain. I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit more about how the SE works sort of separate from pain, just to give a general overview. So when we have a traumatic event or something that we perceive as trauma, what generally happens is that our neocortex and our higher brain function just becomes disconnected. And so our lower brain functions, like our reptilian brain, areas of our brainstem, and our autonomic nervous system, like when people hear about fight or flight, and I'm sure with the psychology background, you're very familiar with all of this. So those lower brainstem functions kick in and create these survival patterns, it's because if it's a traumatic situation, they're trying to get us out of the situation safely. And so those patterns work. If we're still here, we're alive, we survived the trauma. But then what happens that's not so great is that as we go through life, anytime we have another traumatic event or an event of perceived trauma, those same response patterns will kick in. And they're not necessarily that healthy or that functional of patterns. So, what we're kind of going through life and we may notice that we have these these responses that aren't really what we want to have, or they don't really feel that that good with us or aligned with us, or we don't like our behavior. But then it's very difficult to sort of change them through cognitive thought, which is what a lot of us try to do. I think we try to be very aware and conscious, which is great. Like, awareness is really necessary, I think, to create change. But if we're just trying to create change from like our higher brain function and not addressing the place where those patterns got wired in, then we're not really being very effective. So with the SE strategy, it's what's called a bottom-up therapy, because it works more with the lower brainstem functions and with the reptilian brain. And so it goes in and actually speaks in the language of the trauma, which is through the body's physiology and through sensation. So it's kind of an overview of like why this work is so valuable and why it works from, you know, kind of a loose neuroscience perspective. I didn't go too deep into it, but I think that gives a good overview. And then like the reptilian brain and the lower brainstem function, the language of those areas is through sensation. So one of the coolest things that I like about it, because when I've studied other kinds of trauma resolution, a lot of times you need to like go back in and relive the trauma. But with SE, you really don't. It's not even that important to know like why the pattern formed, where it came from. It doesn't really like matter so much for this purpose. I mean, you know, sometimes people need to go in and do all of those things. I'm not discounting that work. I'm just talking about like with the SE, when you can go in and be aware and actually feel what's happening via sensation in your physiology right now, you start to teach your body that it's safe and it's okay to be in your body and to feeling these things. And there's certainly more to it to this, and there's techniques where you sort of weave back and forth between like what's happening now, and then it'll kind of bring you back to like what was happening then, but all from a feeling perspective, just from observing sensation. So I hope that makes sense. That's kind of a general overview.
Yeah, it sounds really, really, I'm sorry to interrupt. It sounds very interesting. Are there some resources, you know, either books or websites that people can go to get a little bit more information?
Definitely. The main resource I'll give, because it has like books and articles and research-based articles, I mentioned it earlier, it's called traumahealing.org. And so it's all one word. So if you want to link that, I can text it to you too, if you're wondering about the spelling or anything. But there, Dr. Peter Levine, who created this work, he's got a number of books out, and those are listed on there. And then there's also a bunch of like peer-reviewed articles and research. So that's really nice, because you can see, you know, kind of what research was happening 5-10 years ago, and then what's more current. And if you're like me and you like learning about the brain, it goes in much more detail than sort of the general overview that I gave. So that's a great resource. And if you're interested in trying the work, you can also find an SEP, a somatic experiencing practitioner that lives near you. If you ever want to try the work or anything like that.
That's really great. And can you repeat the name of the online course that you've created?
Yes, so the online course that I offer, it's a 30-day program, and it's called Increase Your Ease, because that's what it's designed to do. We do use components of SE work within the course, but it's not an SE, like solely an SE course. But we do use some of the techniques and the tools, but it's really designed to introduce very simple tools and techniques that I've been studying for the past decade, 15 years, things like meditation, Qigong, and some other practices. We introduce those to women in a way that fits into their schedule and that they can manage, and then give them a lot of support to see what's working, what's not working, and then just figure out ways to really lower the stress level and to empower them with tools so that they can have a better relationship with stress and anxiety. And I've seen some really profound results from people that I've worked with. So it's been really, really a good program, a great program.
That's really great. And, you know, obviously, decreasing stress and anxiety has a huge impact on quality of life and is, you know, very related to self-care, which is why I thought that this would make for such an interesting interview. So, Alice, what kinds of things do you do personally to practice self-care? It sounds like, with your background also in Chinese medicine and being kind of very in tune with your body, you probably do some unique things, and probably some other things that I try to do for myself as well. So if you share a little bit about that, that would be great.
So I do a variety of things for my own self-care, and part of the reason I got so interested in stress and anxiety research and in working within that field is because I had a lot of stress and anxiety. So I love to get out in nature. That's one of my biggest things. I live about an hour from some pretty cool national forests. So usually at least once a week, I'll get out and climb a peak and do a hike and just try to get away from people and from noise and from the city. So that's a big one for me. Every day I take walks along the cliffs where I live. So I get up an hour early just to walk so I can look at the ocean and get my body moving. I do have like a little qigong practice that I do because I mentioned my Chinese medicine background. And then I love going to the spa. One of my best self-care days I had a couple weeks ago. I took a Tuesday off because the poppies were blooming here in Southern California, and it was
Oh,
this
I've seen
huge.
some pictures online.
It was amazing, but it was causing major traffic jams and like like all these people trying to go. So I got up at like 4:30 on a Tuesday and drove out to where these poppy fields were so I could get there early. And I had such an amazing hike, and it was so beautiful. And I beat the crowds. And then one of my favorite spas is like 10 minutes from there. It's saunas and a clay room. It was like the best day I've had. It was so nice in a really long time. So I love like treating myself to things like that. But then, also with my daily practices, I do my daily walks. I do my qigong. I do, like 5-minute meditations. I go to some meditation groups. So I always look at self-care as like, what can I do each day? And then when I need the bigger things, like I'm going to Sedona next week and just disconnecting for a week.
Oh, I love
Um,
Sedona.
yeah, me too. I haven't been in a year. My partner's never been. So we're excited. We're going to like do some backcountry camping and then come in and stay at a nice resort. So
That's awesome. I'm
uh,
a camper too.
I love it. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I've never camped outside of New England, but
Oh
um,
my gosh, you got
I know,
to.
I know. Bucket list. Um,
Yeah. But you've got some beautiful spots up there too. The White
yeah,
Mountains are
we do.
amazing.
We do for sure. Um, so yeah, that is really interesting. I can't wait um, to dig into this a little bit deeper and check it out. And I'm envious of your availability to access beautiful nature. There are some very nice places around here. I'm at least an hour away from the beach, and I am a huge beach person. I grew up on the beach in Connecticut, and we have Cape Cod, which is spectacular,
Hmm.
but it's a good 2 hour drive from here. And then there's neat spots in Maine too. I'm going to Maine next month, and
Awesome.
I'm definitely looking forward to that. There's some nice walks, and
It's beautiful up there, and there's so few people in New England. It's like once you get out, you really are away from everybody.
well, I commute into Boston, so
Oh yeah, okay.
on those
You got a
days
lot of
it
people.
doesn't feel like there are too few people. I take the train and it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
we're
that's a
sardines.
little
But
different.
yes, it is nice to get out and enjoy things. We do have a lot to offer here as well. Well, thank you so much. This was really great, and I think is sort of a beautiful component of self-care, and will really share something new with the U Time audience. And I really want to thank you for being on the show.
Oh yeah, thanks so much for having me. I love talking about this stuff. I'm so passionate about it. It's really fun to share. Okay, if anybody wants to find me online, probably the best way is through my Instagram, which is just DR for doctor, period, and then Alice Kerby. So Dr. Alice Kerby. And then there's links to my website with my courses, and then on there I try to make my Instagram fairly educational. So I offer a little bit of education about some of the things we were talking about today with how the brain works, and then just some tools for managing stress and anxiety. So come check me out over there.
That is great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.